Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is your Jedi Sentinel, and welcome to our final video in another timeline, another life, our review retrospective on David Warner as the Unbound Doctor. From 2003 to his death in 2022, and his final stories being released posthumously through 2024, David Warner has played the Doctor across a whopping 25 stories. 5 box sets of 4 stories each, plus 5 individual stories. So I thought it would be nice to end this series looking at what I think are his top 10 best stories. You know how these videos work. Everything presented here is my opinion. It's perfectly alright to disagree. Comment below what your top 10 Warner Doctor stories are. Before we begin properly, I just want to discuss something I kind of noticed about the Doctor Who fandom when it comes to rankings and opinions on stories. There are 2 groups of Doctor Who fans. One group rates stories just based on their overall quality. One group rates stories based on their overall quality as well, but based on the Doctor's role in that story. So I'll use the 10th Doctor as an example. There are people who will say their favorite 10th Doctor story is Blink in that first group, just overall quality. And then there will be another group of people, that other group of people will say Blink can't be your favorite 10th Doctor story because it's a Doctor Light story. The Doctor doesn't play a role, the Doctor does kind of play a role in that story. The Doctor doesn't feature heavily in that story and plays a minor role in it. All of this to say that when it comes to my opinions and my ranking of things, I fall into the former. I just rate things based on overall quality of the story. There are some stories, of course, on this list that are ranked where they are solely because of the Doctor's role in it, and we'll talk about it too. Also, looking at all these stories together, you might notice me contradict myself based on earlier reviews. So, like, in reviewing a box set, I might have said, oh, this story is the best story in this box set. And on this list, I might have 2 stories from that box set, but I'll have a different story ranked higher than the story I said was the best box set on that list. I'm a human being, I'm fallible, and opinions are prone to changing. Also, I am looking at these stories now, ranking them all together all at once, in a different context. So with everything out of the way, let's just get started. So starting off at the bottom, number 10, Doctor Who Unbound, Masters of War. Before I get into this story itself, there is something I want to say. For the longest time, I had my list written down here in my notepad, and I had everything ready to go. And then the second before I decided to start recording this video, I changed my original number 10. My original number 10 was going to be Time Lord Immemorial, which I know I didn't review as part of this series, but I still do like it. It's a great send-off for Warner, better than the War Master Part 1. But there was another story I wanted to put on this list, and just looking at my ranking, I was trying to figure out what story I could replace it with. Ultimately, the decision was just to knock Time Lord Immemorial off the list and move the rest of the stories 1 spot down, slotting in that story I wanted to add. If I remember, I'll tell you what that story was. Anyway, Masters of War. So this is a decent story. It's better than Sympathy for the Devil. Sympathy for the Devil has some good moments, but is overall a weak story and also kind of very racist. But this is the story where David Warner's interpretation of the Doctor starts to crystallize. Like I said, we start to see that spark in Warner's performance that he really begins figuring out what his Doctor is. And again, it's all based on performance because, like Sympathy for the Devil, he is still written like Jon Pertwee in this story because he is the alternate universe 3rd Doctor. Like I said, my biggest issue with this story is the Quatch. Saying that the entire time in this universe that there was a third party interfering in the creation of the Daleks. It robs the Daleks of a lot of the horror because so much of the terror of the Daleks just comes from the fact that it was their own making. They chose to create themselves in this image. And having it say, oh, there was this third party pulling the strings the entire time, just robs the Daleks of a lot of their horror, like I said. But like I said, the story is really here just for Warner's performance. He's not there yet. He won't be there until he's partnered up with Bernice Summerfield, but we really start getting to see him become his own version of the Doctor here. Number 9. Clear History from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 5, Buried Memories. This was, again, my favorite story in Volume 5, and I think the strongest story in Volume 5. I really liked the commentary on this story, or as I said, my interpretation of the commentary on this story about the death of physical media. Warner and Bowerman are great as always, and there is just a really good message here about creativity and what happens to history when there is no physical paper trail, when it only exists digitally and digital can be altered. Number 8. The Very Dark Thing from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 3, The Unbound Universe. This is just a very creative alternate universe take on how the Mind Robber would kind of play out in a post-Time War universe, under the assumption that the land of fiction was somehow created by a weapon. There's some really trippy storytelling going on here. I want to say visuals so bad, but as an audio, that's clearly not the case. But the sound design, the performances, all create this really trippy environment where the rules of reality are in flux. And again, I think some of the best Warner Doctor stories have a message to them, and this one is about communication. You have this society who, during the Great War, the Warner Doctor's version of the Time War, kind of destroyed themselves trying to defeat their enemies. And you have one of their enemies trying to reach out and communicate with them, but just unable to reach them. They don't want to kill them, but the conflict is continuously exacerbated because the two sides can't communicate. There is something really beautifully tragic to that, and that just kind of hauntingly rings true. Number 7, Planet X. Also from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 3, The Unbound Universe. So I know in my review, I said The Very Dark Thing is the best story in the Unbound Universe, and I still do think it is. I rank this story higher because, here comes one of my contradictions from the introduction, because of the Doctor's role in this story. This is one of the few times we see the Warner Doctor, righteously angry. I love when the Doctor does righteous fury. It's one of the reasons Colin Baker is my favorite Doctor, because he does it the best. And we don't get that as often with the Warner Doctor, but this is a shining example. Remember, Planet X is an alternate universe take on the Happiness Patrol. And when the Doctor sees what Planet X's leaders have essentially robbed their people of, he is furious. And he does some very Seventh Doctor-ish things throughout the course of this story. It shows us a darker side to this Doctor that really fleshes him out. Number 6, Wolf from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 7, Blood and Steel. There is a very strong bias towards Blood and Steel. I think from the box set era, it is the strongest box set on the whole. In fact, there are 3 Volume 7 stories on this list. So let's start with Wolf, which is just absolutely devastating. After the aftermath of, the Doctor and Bernice stopping a cyber invasion, we follow a young man who was caught up in the crossfire. Wolf was converted into a Cyberman, and he tries to go home and resume his life, only to kind of see that his new identity is more of a burden on people. Like I said when I reviewed Blood and Steel, I kind of made the comparisons the comparison to Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, and that still rings true, only arguably Wolf has a much happier ending. Although still a really bleak one, because by the end of the story, despite Bernice's intervention trying to help him, he decides to become a soldier. Actually, now that I think about it, that is one of the weak points, I think, of Blood and Steel, that after this story, we don't see Wolf again. Because it feels like in the last two stories, Wolf is going to come back. It's fine that he doesn't, but that does kind of feel like a hanging plot thread. But overall, Wolf, just an absolutely haunting story about the human condition in one of history's most horrifying periods to be human. Number 5, Willkommen. Also from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 7, Blood and Steel. The opening story of the set and the one that precedes Wolf, because this is the story where Wolf gets converted into a Cyberman. That's the word they use. Also, so remember back in number 10, how I said I had to knock Time Lord in Memorial off the list and push all the other stories down to add another story onto this ranking? Willkommen was that story. So, like, the original plan would have been Time Lord in Memorial was going to be number 10, Masters of War was going to be number 9, Clear History was going to be number 8, The Very Dark Thing was going to be number 7, Planet X was going to be number 6, and Wolf was going to be number 5. Yeah, I really wanted Willkommen to be on this list. It's just that good of a story. Again, just the blending of fascism with the Cybermen. It's such a haunting ideal, especially when it's Nazism and, you know, just the whole Nazi ideology, especially in regards to conformity. Mixing it with the Cybermen is just such a haunting idea. I'm kind of surprised that Doctor Who, prior to this, TV show, books, comics, audios, nothing has done it before. Granted, we do have another fascist allegory in Doctor Who with the Daleks, but just, man, I think if anyone listens to Blood and Steel, it's going to stick with them. Not just because it was one of the first Warner Doctor sets released posthumously. I think it was released pretty soon after his death. But just because of, you know, just the haunting imagery and darkly beautiful storytelling prevalent throughout this set as a whole. Number 4, The Angel of History, from Bernice Summerfield, The Story So Far, Volume 2. So I'm gonna be honest, like, the last 6 stories on this list are all kind of much darker and bleaker in tone than some of the rest of the list. I guess I'm just kind of a sadist, or would it be a masochist in this particular regard? I don't know. I like having my heartstrings tugged on. I like feeling things. Like Wolf, this is a Dr. Light story where the Doctor barely features. This time around, we follow Bernice, or Benny, as she is living through someone's history. Because as an archaeologist, something like this is important to Bernice. She is constantly fighting some form of oppression as her history is being denied, being erased, and she's continuing to try and fight to be recognized as a person. It's, I keep saying this, but like, I just really like these dark stories. There's something beautiful about it. Warner only periodically pops up throughout this story as Bernice's anchor, because as she's living this experience, she's kind of forgotten who she is. So Warner is kind of there to pull her out and back into the real world, which leads to just this absolutely beautiful ending where, despite having learned the truth and having seen everything firsthand, the Doctor just encourages Benny to dig, what she does best. Number 3, Have I Told You Lately, from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 6, Lost in Translation. This is just a phenomenal two-person play starring David Warner and Lisa Bowerman. After having some kind of squabble, some kind of argument, Benny and the Doctor are on the outs with each other. And as they start to explore a mysterious spaceship the TARDIS has landed on, their only means of communication is a malfunctioning computer unit of sorts, a communications unit, computer intercom, it's all sorts of things. And as they try to find a way to meet up with each other, they have to teach this computer system how to speak, what words mean, how to communicate. Because communication is a key theme of this story. Again, like, which one was it? The Very Dark Thing. And this one is just, it shows what happens when there is, because, there is more than one language barrier, one kind of language barrier, Like when you say language barrier, you think of people speaking two different languages. But there are others, like the kind the Doctor has put up between himself and Bernice because of his own feelings now about traveling around in her universe. And it's the Doctor and Bernice at some of their best. Also, props to the actor, whose name I'm forgetting, who had to play the computer, because there is a point in this story where when Bernice and the Doctor are able to directly communicate with each other, they're doing it through this computer, and that actor does a terrific job of sounding like them. Not as an imitation, because he's talking in the voice of the computer, but in their inflections and their mannerisms. I'm going to be honest, the last two stories, the two stories I think are the Warner Doctor's best, they are very close for me. They are practically neck and neck. Like, had I made this video at any other time, my opinion could have shifted. Number 2, Auf Wiedersehen, from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 7, Blood and Steel. This story is the finale of Blood and Steel, and continuing through just such a haunting, tragic set, this story ramps it up to 11. The Doctor is held prisoner by the Cybermen because they want him to become their cyber planner, but he is resisting the conversion. So they trap him in a nightclub and force him to meet and bond with the patrons of this club before they convert them into Cybermen themselves, losing all their identities. And as much as the Doctor hates it, as much as it tears him up, he knows he can't give in. He knows he's in a losing battle because he knows what's coming in the form of World War II, but he also knows what will happen to the universe if the Cybermen win. So he has to choose the less damaging loss in the grand scheme of the universe. Again, despite clearly being so sick in this story, Warner is giving it his all, and it is one of his best performances. Like, the story overall is brilliant, but this story could just rank so highly on his performance alone. But of course, speaking of stories that could just be ranked highly because of David Warner's performance alone, you should know this was coming. Number 1, what I think is the best story for David Warner's Unbound Doctor, or certainly my favorite story for David Warner's Unbound Doctor, Asking for a Friend, from the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 4, Ruler of the Universe. This story is just an absolutely brutal gut punch. Again, I might be kind of a sadist or a masochist. I know one likes giving pain, one likes receiving it. Not getting into that, because I like dark stories like this. I like being devastated and crying. It's a sign of how emotionally effective a story is. And this story just gives such a deep dive into the Doctor that I don't think we've ever gotten before or since. As ruler of the universe, the Doctor can't do what he used to do. Now he's tied up by bureaucratic red tape, because in the past, as a traveler, he could just show up somewhere and save a planet. Now he has to get the approval to do so. And when he can't, and that planet and its people die, it weighs heavily on him. He hates this position of power again. Like I said, this story, this box set, is the 10th Doctor era done right, because the Doctor hates being in positions of divine authority. He hates being the highest power. Excuse me. Something that the 10th Doctor era just never got right. And Warner gives this brutal performance of how much this is weighing on him, to the point that Benny rightfully suggests he seeks out a therapist, which gives us our other heartbreaking performance from Annette Badland as the Doctor and his therapist, I'm forgetting her name, excuse me, build up this rapport throughout their sessions, only for her to realize that the Doctor has entirely rewritten her life, because she told the Doctor about her tragedy, so he went back and undid it. But instead of it being a good thing, instead of her having the life she always wanted, it causes her an existential crisis. This story is fantastic. I'm realizing now just how bleak the Warner Doctor stories are from set to set. And again, it's just, I can understand some people being put off by it, but it's just something I personally enjoy myself. And this story really is the jewel in the crown for the David Warner Doctor. And there you have it, what I think are David Warner's top 10 best stories as the Unbound Doctor. Again, what is your top 10 Warner Doctor stories? Please share in the comments below, and of course, as always, remember to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload, and in the description box below, you will find the link to my socials, where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.